The United States of America is a de facto two-party system. While we technically have the ability to cast votes for candidates outside of the duopoly, some of them even getting a decent bit of notoriety, ultimately, most political action in the United States is done through the Democrat and Republican parties. And a lot of people are not particularly fans of this. If you have been on this channel for a while, you know that the initial conception behind it was criticism of the two-party system and advocacy for third parties through learning their history and the pretty vital role that they play. And you can't really blame me, considering the election that really opened my eyes to politics seemed to be the prime opportunity for a third party to rise. But you also may have noticed a significant lack of that in the current stage of this channel. The reason for that being the simple fact that it seems that third parties have just kind of, not necessarily disappeared, obviously, but they've gotten a lot less notable. Again, despite the fact that 2016 seemed to be the prime opportunity for the rise of third parties, it seems that they kind of ended with a whimper in the intervening elections, which has led me to start pondering the question, are we doomed to a two-party system forever? First, I think it's important for us to understand the role that third parties play in the US political system. And this role can be best exemplified by something that I call the third party cycle. A third party does well in one election, gets blamed as a spoiler, directly or indirectly. The following election, their platform gets swallowed up by one of the two major parties. That momentum fades away the following election, before we end up back to square one. And while you might think this might just be like some slightly similar trends, it almost works like clockwork, to be honest. Let's start with the creation of the first third party in the US's history, the Anti-Masonic Party. While it can't necessarily be blamed for Clay's loss, the results of the 1832 election would lead to them to merge with the National Republican Party to create the Whigs. Back to two parties for a little while, then the rise of the abolition issue led to the creation of the Liberty and Free Soils parties, who would end up folding into the new Republican Party. Bimetallism would lead to the rise of the People's Party before they got swallowed up by the Democrats. After that, we got the rise of progressivism in the aptly named era, leading to the creation of the Bull Moose Party before they got swallowed back up to the GOP. And to this day, the cycle still happens, just on a significantly smaller scale. Let's analyze the elections that happened in my lifetime, shall we? The 2000 presidential election had Ralph Nader and the Green Party be blamed for spoiling the election for Al Gore. 4 years later, we see the Democrats make a desperate plea to prevent that from happening again by appealing to Nader voters. Now they're a bit more loud about things like the Iraq War and the environment, things that a lot of Greens would be more open about. And we see that both Ralph Nader and the Green Party didn't do so hot this election. And by 2008, it seems that most of that momentum has been swallowed up by the Democratic Party through the campaign of Barack Obama. And now the Democrats have been put in a position where they can finally implement the hope and change that they campaigned on. Hope and change that did not happen, leading to various different protest movements across the political spectrum, which in turn led to a larger share of the population voicing their discontent with the two parties, culminating with a situation where we had the two least popular presidential candidates in US history duking it out. Unsurprisingly, people were super interested in literally anybody else becoming president, leading to these two to become the voices of a generation, despite neither of them being ideal in their own right. And despite the momentum being there for these two parties to then take that and move on in their own direction to become a viable political force, by the next cycle, it seems everything went back to normal. Granted, that specific one had a very extenuating circumstance, but even when things went back to relative normalcy, the momentum didn't track. Despite the hype, it just didn't pan out. Why is that? Well, simply put, many third parties really just cannot be viable forces by nature. By nature, they are vehicles to express anger at the two-party system every 4 years, and are rarely active beyond that. And when I say not active beyond that, I don't even necessarily mean them being completely off the table. Sometimes they do run a couple of candidates here and there, but for various reasons, they seem to be a lot more quiet in the intervening years. It's what sadly makes these third parties very easy to astroturf. Especially when a lot of third parties are kind of mostly just small groups of people usually focused around one guy. Like the Reform Party was basically just Ross Perot's party, and after he left, the party went nowhere. It's also why a lot of third parties want to just find someone who's a reject from the two-party system to run their campaigns. Libertarians with Gary Johnson, Greens with Cynthia McKinney, Constitutionalists with Virgil Goode. Even in situations where it doesn't make sense, like when the Libertarian Party decided in 2008 they were going to nominate an anti-gay marriage, anti-marijuana, and pro-Iraq war representative to be their nominee. Why? Because it was much easier than running a person who was of their own rank and file. Not to say that every third party is like this. The more ideological ones, like the socialist and communist parties, worked beyond the 4-year cycle. Others simply don't. A lot of that is obviously due to the political system that we are in, incentivizing the need for a two-party system. But it's not like it's unheard of for another party to break through the system. It's obviously happened before. Is it just because modern-day third parties are not as interested in building the long-term infrastructure? Because unfortunately to me, it seems like the answer to that question might be yes. Especially through my interactions with many third-party quote-unquote activists, basically treating it as if it's a quick fix. Like, if we just do this, then automatically third parties are going to become viable and then we're going to have like a multi-party democracy in America. And then when you do further research into the things that they say are quick fixes, it's just not true. Let's look at some examples. If we implement ranked choice voting, third parties are going to start automatically winning. Maine has had ranked choice voting since 2018. Alaska has had it since 2022. Third parties have not benefited from this system at all. I mean, why would it automatically benefit them? It benefits candidates and parties that are viable. A third-party candidate still needs to put in the work to become viable, to be the person that is ranked second on almost everyone's ballots, and to make sure that they have enough room so that when the next round happens, they are not automatically eliminated in round 1. And before you suggest that maybe the issue is where they got ranked choice voting, it's actually worse, considering these are the two states that probably would be the most open to electing a person outside of the two-party system. Not only do the congressional delegations of these two states seem to drift far off from what is the natural perception of what the two parties are, not only to the point where they technically have already rejected the duopoly with one of their senators, but Maine specifically almost had Ross Perot as their choice for president. But also, when you just objectively look at the candidates who have benefited under ranked choice voting, 2 Democrats who do not necessarily fit in the label of what a Democrat is supposed to be. The next talking point that I have heard time and time again is the simple idea of if we get a third party to 5% of the vote in the general election, it will become viable because they will get the elusive federal matching funds. First of all, they don't really mention the idea or plan on how to get to that 5%, but let's ignore that for the time being and just focus on these federal matching funds. What are federal matching funds? In the case of electoral politics, federal matching funds are the funds that you get for your presidential campaign to essentially prevent your party from going bankrupt. They match the amount of money that you have raised in your campaign and give you an extra $250 per contribution to your campaign. For the sake of an example, let's use Jill Stein's 2016 campaign to explain how these federal matching funds would actually work. During said campaign, she raised a grand total of $11,499,548.55 off of 9,447 donations. Meaning that had Jill Stein gotten that 5%, she would have received a check for $13,861,298.55 to use in the 2020 election. Now, on a first glance, you might go, yeah, that will definitely benefit the Green Party. It's definitely a lot more money than she actually received. But the big problem is, just because you get a big check in the mail does not automatically mean you know how to spend it, and that money could very easily be wasted. Take the Reform Party in the year 2000. They qualified for roughly that exact amount of money, and yet, what's the Reform Party doing now? I'll tell you what they're not doing: winning. And it's because the same election cycle that check was given to them, the Reform Party was in a massive ideological battle with tons of infighting that were making the party just an absolute train wreck. That's one of the main reasons why Ross Perot left the party. And if you were paying attention to the Green Party primary process in 2020, as I was, you would know that primary was definitely filled to the brim with tons of infighting that took whatever viability the party had and just completely tarnished it. I don't have faith that a $13 million check would have fixed the problems that they had. The party still has to actually be viable to get people to go on board with it. Which inevitably leads to the last and most troubling argument that they make, and it's the one where they just say, if we just stop it with the Stockholm Syndrome of the two parties, then third parties will magically start winning. Buddy, political independents have been the largest voting bloc since 2009. And in that same time, we have seen a lot more people all across the political spectrum be very vocal about their hatred for the two-party system. It's not their fault that you still can't provide a viable alternative to the two-party duopoly. I distinctly remember a lot of these third-party people saying that the Democrats and Republicans have to earn your vote. Well, why are you any different? Why do you have to automatically get my vote because I'm not a fan of the two-party system? What if I think you're not a viable party? What if I think your candidates stink? Oh, well, you have to vote for us or else you gotta vote for one of these two. That sounds like a very familiar argument. The fact that you are unable to look internally at your own problems and instead want to blame the duopoly for every single problem that you are facing electorally is a big issue. The corporate duopoly is working against us. Bro, the Communist Party faced significantly worse issues than you, and they did significantly better. With less members even. They did so well that they had to spend an entire decade tearing down the infrastructure they had built. Meanwhile, you guys get mad because you make novice campaign mistakes every single person would know not to do? And you're wondering why we're not flocking to you as the saviors from the evil corporate duopoly? If you want more people to take you seriously, be better. But until you do get better, then it looks like the answer to the question might be a resounding yes. The only counter-argument that most people would make to say no, and that a third party is inevitable, is to bring up the historical role that third parties have played in the past, bringing a major issue to light, causing a major ideological shift in the two parties, and then leading to a new party system. So some might argue it's inevitable that that will happen again. Except for the fact that a lot of political scientists have already concluded that the six-party system is dead and that we are now in the seventh-party system, which occurred without a third party helping facilitate it. Groups outside of the traditional party politics did it, whether they be activist movements like BLM, Occupy, or the Tea Party, general online discourse, or political organizations that are not parties in the traditional sense, like Democratic Socialists of America, who ironically enough would probably be the only route to a third party if we're honest to ourselves. I mean, they're borderline a third party due to the fact that they are clearly not traditional Democrats, and the Democratic Party spends so much time fighting them as if they are another political party. And the ultimate strategy of DSA, for the time being, is that running as a Democrat thing being just a build-up to make a base large enough to eventually do a dirty break and become an independent party. I mean, this would address one of the major concerns with the current third-party infrastructure, as DSA is clearly a lot more ideological and less personal than other third parties that we have at the moment, to the point where they're actually willing to burn the bridges with their ideological mainstays. And a similar strategy has been done with the Working Families Party in New York and the Vermont Progressive Party, so maybe if you don't want to be doomed to a two-party duopoly, you should join DSA. At least in the system that we have today, in a system of first-past-the-post voting and just how the party infrastructure is currently, that seems to be the only route that currently exists in America to do a third party. The only other alternative would be massively changing how the United States' electoral system is, implementing some form of proportional representation. Otherwise, the concept of a third party in America is just not gonna happen. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to find a future video when it comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.